Well, look, a warm welcome to Captain Gemma Rowland to Forces Sport, the first chance that we've had to catch up with you for a wee while. You are an athlete with many talents. Rugby is your go-to game, but you're somebody with many strings to your bow, and the latest you've only just accomplished, and that's your Mental Health First Aid Award. Before we dig deeper into your rugby background and sporting background, what is a mental health first aider?
So it's, I did a course, it's a 2-day course. Mine was split over 4 sessions over 4 days, so a little easier to digest in smaller chunks. It basically gives you a better understanding and knowledge of the different types of mental health illnesses or issues, and then kind of equips you with a way to support those in need. So how to approach a conversation, how to steer a conversation delicately into matters that sometimes are very hard to talk about, and obviously also how to recognise the early signs and symptoms, which sometimes we're not necessarily aware of, or we put down to something else. So it's kind of put me in a very confident position to be able to better support colleagues, teammates, friends.
I was going to say, that's something that will cross over between being on the sports pitch and being a captain looking after perhaps junior soldiers, older soldiers as well. So it's going to help you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know off of the back of COVID that mental health illnesses have dramatically spiked across the country. And it is kind of like a second pandemic in itself, I think, and it's something that as a nation we're fighting really hard to better support. Unfortunately, that then burden falls on the NHS, which is already under a lot of pressure with dealing with the pandemic. The Army have Op Smart, which is the kind of mental health and resilience training in place. So again, we're looking at different ways to tackle the stigma that's always been around mental health. But I think that as an individual, every little piece that you can do to support anybody in your immediate circle, whether that be gaining a better understanding or just finding ways to tackle that stigma and being open and approachable, it just makes us better as a society.
As an elite athlete, this is your second home almost, being in a gym. So what was it then that encouraged you, or what was the motivation for you to think, well, I probably need to look after what's in between my own ears and everybody else as well?
So I got asked to be an ambassador for the Brave Mind charity, which is a mental health charity focusing on the rugby community at the moment. They go into rugby clubs and they train kind of mental health champions to then be able to offer support kind of within the teams. It's something that I've been very passionate about based on my own previous experiences of mental health issues, and like I said, knowing that it's very prevalent in society now, and knowing that rugby is a community, I wanted to do something or put myself in a position to be able to help my community and my rugby family.
And you mentioned that you have a history of having dealt with your own mental health in the past. It's amazing that organisations as big as the Army, and I assume across the armed forces, are now dealing with mental health the way they are, and you must see that as a good thing, I'm sure. Can you give us a bit of insight as to when you realised that mental health was so important in your life and has obviously brought you, because I'm sure before you did this course you were helping people because you got experience of it. Could you sort of give us an idea of when it sort of became prevalent in your life and how you saw it going forward?
Yeah, so when I was younger, so I was about 15, 16, I've used the word suffer, and that's something we got taught not to do on our mental health course. I experienced bulimia. It was tied very much to other experiences going on in my life at the time, and wasn't necessarily tied to body image. Unfortunately, it wasn't handled in the right way, and then it became very much about body image because I got asked to keep a food diary or track my weight, and therefore then it became obsessive in terms of managing my diet and nutrition. And it got handled in totally the wrong way, and therefore became a bigger issue than it needed to. So I knew from a younger age that it was certainly something that I was aware of, having had my own experiences, and had always questioned how it could have been dealt with differently. And I do kind of talk about it, or try to talk about it openly on my social media as a platform, or make younger girls aware when I'm a role model to them or engaging with them in a sporting context, that I can be approached and I'm happy to talk about it. But I think kind of over the last 2 years with the pandemic, it's really kind of refreshed in my brain just actually how important it is that we take action, that we don't just we're not reactive, we're proactive with it. I think for myself, I've found myself slipping back into quite a hard, a struggle really. My capacity was kind of reaching its maximum. I was trying to support my family through the pandemic by babysitting or offering support, so I kind of moved my life back to Bristol while still trying to do a full-time job, working from home, and then also still trying to commit to playing for Wasps, which has always been my club and has been for the last 8 years. But that means a kind of 3.5 hour drive from Bristol on a Tuesday and Thursday, and not getting back in kind of until midnight. And I just realised that my capacity was, I'd kind of reached that level, and I needed to do something about it, which is why I moved to Bristol Bears, just to kind of reduce that travelling time. And they were really amazing and welcoming and supportive for me during that time. But it made me question how many other people are maybe in the same position as me, but because possibly haven't experienced a form of mental health illness before, maybe aren't aware of it or don't know how to ask for help or how to do something to put themselves in a position to be able to manage it.
Well, that commute to and from training or give you a chance to listen to the Forces Sport podcast might not help your mental health. As a mental health first aider, are you able to recognise symptoms?
Yeah, I think, well, there'll be some that, so it was really interesting on the course, because I think when we talk about mental health, especially at the moment, I keep saying, it's been more prevalent during the pandemic. We're actually focusing a lot on anxiety, depression, and potentially the eating disorders as a coping mechanism, but they don't then necessarily address the psychosis side of things, or the ones that are actually, or actually reaching that crisis stage. We talk about depression, and a lot of people throw that word around without possibly knowing what it means, or we say throwaway comment, oh, someone's got OCD because they like to keep things tidy. But actually, when you examine it, do they really have OCD, or are they just kind of being tidy? So it's really made me think about using the right language and recognising actually what it is the person is experiencing. So I think it definitely has equipped me to be able to notice symptoms or to pick up on them, and then the most important thing is then how you approach a conversation with them, because you can't just go straight in and be like, are you depressed, or are you suicidal, because then the person's just going to recoil. So you just start with a how are you, or how are you really, and you have to ask more than once. People aren't just going to open up, and putting yourself in a position where you can be understanding and empathetic. Empathy, I think, is a huge one, and just really listening. I think that's been something I've really focused on over the last kind of 2 years, is an active listening. So I think as a society we have a very bad habit of listening to respond. So as someone's talking to us, in our head we're going, okay, this is what I'm going to say in response to that, this is how I'm going to reply to that. And then we stop listening.
I'm doing it now.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, you're interviewing, so I'll let you slide a little bit. But we're not listening. And then if there's a pause, we then start panicking, go, I have to fill the silence. Well, no, actually, if you just chill out for a little bit and let the silence be, sometimes they may fill it, or in that time you can go, okay, so how do you feel about that, or what are you doing as a result of that? And so you're then letting them continue along the same trajectory or with the same conversation without, just putting yourself into the conversation or putting your own thoughts back onto them. So active listening, I think, is probably one of my biggest takeaways, and probably something I recommend everybody tries to do better.
That's us told.
I feel like I can't say anything now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask.
And how does that make you feel?
Well, I think a lot of people probably think that they're giving their advice, but actually, you're right. They're sort of. I've done it myself. I've gone like, oh yeah, okay. Well, what have I experienced in my life that I can reflect on? So it probably comes from a good place. But I totally hear what you're saying, and I wanted to go back because you touched on social media, and I know it's such a. Well, it's Marmite, isn't it? I mean, you either love it or hate it, or you accept that actually you're going to love parts of it, you're going to hate parts of it. But you have always been, ever since I've known you, very active on social media and using it for the positives, but also using it when you're not necessarily in a good place. You could be in a bad place, whether that be injury or whether you are suffering with mental health. So you know, what's your, I'm not saying what's your opinion on social media, because that's huge and we could be here all day, but how do you use social media, not only to help other people, but also for your own well-being as well?
Yeah, so I think that's a twofold question. Like my demographic of followers are very specific. I think it's young girls who aspire to be athletes, not necessarily just rugby players, but I know a lot of them are rugby players. They are other athletes. Obviously you will have some of your friends in there as well, but people generally in the sports world. So, you know, for me recently I had an injury that, you know, was a significant setback in my playing, required surgery, and, you know, I knew I was going to be out for a certain number of months. It's actually quite a common injury, more common than I ever knew, or I'd never heard of it before. But at the same time as I suffered mine, there were 2 other girls within the Welsh squad, and then since then I've known a couple of other people that have suffered with the same injury. And just from kind of posting my journey, I've had people contact me on social media to say, I've got the same injury, I'm really worried, I'm concerned about surgery, what does the recovery look like? You know, and some of them aren't necessarily at the top end of sport, so don't necessarily have the support that I was very fortunate to have through the Welsh Rugby Union. So they're then really concerned about their road to recovery. Someone got told they would never be able to play again, which seemed completely bizarre to me. So I've been able to kind of reassure, and people are then also able to relate when I have a down day, and people don't just look and go, people look and go, thank goodness, like actually this elite athlete is also struggling with her recovery and it's not all silver linings. So then I've had messages from people to say, thank you so much for your post recently, because I've been really struggling and it's just reassured me that there's nothing wrong with me, or that it's okay to have a bad day. And I think that's so important, that we don't make social media highlights reel, and that's something I've always tried not to do. It's hard sometimes because you do want to use it as a platform to say, this is amazing, like I'm back playing, I'm doing what I love. But not every day is like that, and I think it's important to show that balance. Likewise, there was always a stigma around alcohol or eating bad food, you know, having a takeaway. I'm an adult, I'm a 32-year-old woman. If I enjoy a glass of wine, and I know that when I do a load of training, you know, I'm not having it the day before a game, that's for sure, but there is nothing wrong with being an elite athlete and enjoying a glass of wine. But for so many years I avoided putting anything like that on my social media because of the stigma attached.
Will you be judged? You worried you might be judged?
Yeah, basically. Well, you're not an athlete if you're drinking
I'm just
and
taking
eating.
some notes
On how to be an elite athlete.
Yeah, you're having a Chinese takeaway. I'm like, okay, but what you haven't seen, you've seen glimpses of my training throughout the week, but actually I've committed endless hours. I've balanced my nutrition well throughout the week, and actually it's important for me to have an evening where I can just enjoy a bit of a vice. You know, enjoy the food I like to eat and not feel guilty about it. And that's something now I also try to do, is show a balanced lifestyle, because otherwise, tying in with, you know, having an eating disorder when I was younger, if I'm constantly putting in my social media that all I'm doing is training hard and eating healthy, what am I saying to young girls? That they're not allowed to eat sweets, or that, you know, they're not allowed a day off of training if they want to succeed. So I've learned a lot as I've built up kind of my social media platform, and I'm still learning the kind of some do's and don'ts, but I like to think that I portray my authentic self on there.
You're through the other side now of injury, hopefully that is behind you. What's it like back for you out on the pitch playing again? Has it given you a new sense of enjoyment for the game of rugby?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every time I've been injured, so I've had 2 significant injuries that have required surgery. This time I think was much easier for me to handle because I'd been through the process before, so it was a bit, you know, I kind of had that knowledge of what rehab would look like, because it was, you know, lower limb injury again. And this time I was able to look at it and go, okay, why has this happened? Like, is there a reason this has happened? What is it trying to tell me? And for me, it was you just need to stop, you need to slow down. My life is going at a million miles an hour, and I'm somebody who likes to live in the moment. I like to be present and appreciate what I have in every single day, and I wasn't doing that because I was just going from training to training, training to job to hurt, you know, every hour was filled, and it was just like a kind of a hamster wheel, and I never stopped to appreciate and go, I've just played an international game, or, you know, I'm here training in international 7 setup, you know, I've been out with the elite girls at WAS, at no point was I able to just reflect on each session. And I think that this injury allowed me to just stop and go, okay, breathe. Now find the enjoyment again, or find the time to appreciate what you have. Find the enjoyment back in training again. So, I'm not just in the gym training because I have to be fit and strong for rugby. I actually enjoy that hour out of my day. That is something I do for me. And that was one of my biggest takeaways from this injury. But albeit stood on the side of the field then with the girls at training, I was stood there going, I can't wait till I can get back out there, And now I'm back out there and I'm taking what I've learned into those sessions. Every time I'm on the field, I'm like, I love rugby, I love being here, I'm going to appreciate the fact that I get to do this. And I was definitely really thankful of that throughout the lockdown. We were in a very fortunate position as elite athletes that we were still able to play sport. We still had access to a training facility that not many other people were able to do, and I was so grateful for that. And I think that was another thing that's just helped me to kind of hold on to the fun, enjoyment, appreciation that I have for rugby.
So when you were rehabbing, at the same time, were you doing your mental health first aid course? Were you learning things from that course that could help you psychologically through your rehab?
So not at the same time. So the mental health course I've done this week. So obviously I have the back end of my rehab, but I'd learnt from my previous rehab process that it was okay to have bad days, and that sometimes I just had to let myself experience that. And that it wasn't going to be the end of the world. And if I had a day where I just didn't feel like training, I wanted to just sit on the sofa and feel sorry for myself, that was okay, as long as I kind of bargained with myself that tomorrow I would then apply myself. And as with any rehab, the more you apply yourself, the more successful you are. And I learned that previously before, and I said to the surgeon, "You're going to give me a timeline, I'm going to beat it." I said to the Welsh physio, "I'm not happy." When she gave me a timeline, "I'm not happy with that. I'm going to take a month off of it." And as a professional, they go, as a medical professional, they go, they support you, but they're trying to not get your hopes up. And I was like, that's fine, I know what you're doing, but I will beat it. And then I kind of can make it a challenge for myself. Like you can make it your own little competition. So I did beat it by a month, which I'm more than happy with.
It's like racing a sat nav. It's like,
basically, yeah.
It's that mentality.
Did your time at Sandhurst, was there anything that you could draw upon from your military training that's helped you with all of this?
Yeah, 100%. So they say at Sandhurst that the whole thing is a game. The one piece of advice you get given before you go to Sandhurst by anyone that's been through is play the game. The aim of Sandhurst is to break you down as much as they physically can, mentally, physically, emotionally, to test your character when you're in that most depleted state. So when you go out on exercise, so like the final exercise is 3 weeks, you barely sleep for 3 weeks. There's one called, what was it called? It's in the beginning of second term. It's a defensive exercise, and you dig trenches. You cannot go to sleep until all of the trenches for your platoon.
You start to hallucinate, don't you?
Yeah. So for 3 days, you did not sleep at all.
Yeah.
We had in our smocks, I had a packet of Haribo in both pockets.
Other sweets are available.
Yeah. And you'd go out on patrol, and you'd be just eating sugar, trying to. But I saw little green men dancing around the bases of trees. I was hallucinating. I fell asleep while I was walking. So I literally, when you feel like you've just blinked for a long time, but I opened my eyes and everyone in front of me had disappeared, like my platoon had gone, and I was like, I honestly have fallen asleep walking. But you were able to still get through an entire week of exercise because
of Haribo.
Because of Haribo, for one. Other sweets are available. But also because, one, you knew that what you were doing was for a purpose. So I think having a purpose is always a kind of fundamental motivator. You also knew there would be an end point, and knowing that you will get to the end, and that if you just apply yourself, that's like a military mentality for anything. So I've run some marathons before. I've done a half Ironman. People are like, did you train for it? I was like, no, because the military mentality has told me that if I just if I just don't stop, I will get to the end. And I think that's one of the biggest things that Sandhurst has prepared, and the soldier military training establishments are exactly the same. They prepare you for the hard times, and that mentally you know that you have the resilience to get to the end if you just keep going.
So how does that strength that you've learned through the military, and possibly you probably had it in yourself as well because you've dealt with quite a lot in your life, How has that translated onto the rugby pitch, whether that be for the Army, for Wasps or for Wales? Because you are as determined now as you were at the beginning of your elite rugby career to pursue your dreams, to play for your country. So how does that translate across?
I think one of the biggest ones is like realising that you don't necessarily have a limit, or the limit only exists in your mind. We all know that kind of cliche or that well-known quote. But it's so true, and anybody who has set themselves a goal and achieved it, you then use that as a stepping stone to like what you can kind of achieve next. And that's definitely been, the Army taught me that I could achieve so much on so little sleep, so little food, so little energy. It then makes you think, okay, so if I can do that with only a small portion of my capacity, what can I do when I am well rested, well fed, well trained, well recovered? So again, it's one of those, actually, if I apply all of those bricks to my foundation, I can just keep building on that and building on that and building on that. And it's kind of, like you said, a competition with yourself to be like, how far can I go? What can I possibly achieve? So every time I do something well, or you master a skill, rugby, there's so many different elements to it. I'm like, okay, what can I work on next? And I've read some articles, interviews with about Richie McCaw. I'm not comparing myself to Richie McCaw by any stretch of the imagination, but he was the same. So he would focus on like a skill that he wanted to master, and he'd do it until he had it, and it was like second nature to him. And then he'd be like, okay, what can I do next? He was never satisfied with just being like the best at one or two things. He wanted to constantly build, and that's the kind of motivation I have myself to say, okay, what can I keep improving on? What can I build on next? Okay, so I've come back from my rehab and I'm now stronger than I was before. Now what can I do? What's next? Okay, now I want to be more powerful so I can be faster or more explosive on the field. So it's that constant, I'm never going to settle, I'm never done, I want to keep pushing myself. And we spoke briefly before we set off the interview about retirement. I don't see myself having a plan to retire until I feel like I have nothing else to reach or nothing else to give. And even then, it'll be okay, so I'm done putting my boots on the field, but what am I going to do off the field?
Well, you mentioned building and reaching. Wales are building for a World Cup, and you're reaching to be part of that squad. I was going to say, the pandemic has been awful, but it meant that the World Cup was delayed for a year. And that's given you a shot, given you a chance, an opportunity to be involved, you hope, for Wales, for the World Cup in New Zealand, the Women's Rugby World Cup in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would have liked to have thought, even if it was this year, maybe I would have been in with a shot. Circumstances were different, might have not got injured. However, it's played out that it's given us an extra year to prepare, and that's going to be invaluable, I think, to the Welsh squad. We've seen off the back of the Autumn's campaign just how successfully they've built as a squad. The appointment of Nigel Walker and the new CEO have meant that they've taken a vested interest in the female squad. And there is a financial investment, as we've heard about the introduction of contracts, but it's not just the financial incentive, although that definitely helps a lot of the players, but it's the belief and knowing that they want to see us succeed, and that the things that have been promised to the squad for a number of years and never delivered, now they're being delivered, means to the girls that they know the WRU are taking them seriously. And that's the biggest takeaway from us, because the minute you have that hope, that belief, that confidence, you then grow internally as well. And I think we've seen that on their performances on the field. I was gutted not to be involved because of injury, but I'm hoping to, I had a good coach with Johan Cunningham, the new head coach, about what I should focus on. And he said, I just want you to focus on performing well in the Premiership for your first few games back, and then we can pick up a conversation and then hopefully build up into Six Nations. So, the onus is on me to put in my performances with Wasps over the next couple of weeks and months to hopefully then get back into the Six Nations squad, which, we know that the Women's Six Nations is set as a separate tournament now, a little bit later next year, which is amazing again. So loads of opportunity, and it's kind of down to me now to do what I've said I want to do and build, reach, put my performances in to get back into that squad for the Six Nations.
Do you feel that where women's rugby, women's elite rugby is at the moment, maybe at a club level as well, but possibly this is the time where you as a player, they talk about player power as a bad thing sometimes, maybe in there's too much in high performance football, but do you feel that you were talking then about that financial investment, the players were demanding that you were given some kind of security, long-term security, because why would they invest if their time as players for a year and not beyond? So do you feel that you have such player power at the moment? It's a good time to be part of women's rugby. I think that's undeniable, really.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's, for us as a squad and players, it's that we're finally being listened to, or that the things that we've been promised are now being delivered. So some of us, you know, our senior players have been in and around the setup for 6+ years, and we've been asking the same questions / saying the same things, and it's never been delivered on. Now that we've seen it happen, you know, we feel like our voices are being heard, and to feel empowered in that way means that you then, I think you then feel stronger, more resilient, more powerful on the field. You know, what happens off the field, it very much characterises then what's delivered on field in every aspect of the game. And I think for a lot of us, you know, for me, I am towards the back end of an elite playing career, you know, albeit I'm not putting my hand up and saying I'm retiring anytime soon, but I know that realistically I've missed the boat in terms of being able to be a long-term professional athlete. But what we do know is that we're leaving a legacy now for the girls that are coming up after us, and that's what's most important to us senior players, is that in our period of time that we've been playing, the game has evolved so much, and we've created an opportunity now for girls to be able to be professional athletes in the future. So those young girls in Wales who aspire to be rugby players now have an opportunity to aspire to be a full-time athlete. And for us, that's an incredible feeling, to know that we have contributed to what is a changing future.
In financial terms, it's not yet quite possible for women rugby players to purely play rugby. That's just the nature of things are at the moment. But the military has helped a number of elite women rugby players reach the very top, as you, of course. But last season, Harlequins with, well, there's a whole list of you. Amy Cockayne, I know she's Royal Air Force, but military colleague. Sarah Bonner has just joined them. Beth Ann Dainton, Jade Mullen, Alex Eddy. It says an awful lot that they were able to be part of that successful Harlequins setup. Without putting a recruiting hat on, it's a career path that does work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the British Army have definitely realised that. I mean, the RAF, you can see, they've done some very successful recruitment. They've also recruited Sarah Graham, who's playing England under-20s. So again, she'll be another string to their bow. So inter-service is going to be very interesting this year. But again, like the Army have realised, or all forces have realised, just how synonymous being an athlete and being a soldier are. And there are a very minute portion of athletes who get to make it as professional athletes. That's not just in the women's game, that's in the men's game and across all sports as well. So there will be then, you know, so say 2% of people get to make it professionally. There are 98% of sports people, athletes, who then are looking for a career that could allow them the same benefits. The force is a no-brainer, and that's the reason that I joined and got coerced into joining the Royal Artillery, because Brigadier James Cook was at Sandhurst when I was there and went, if you come and join the artillery, you can play as much rugby as you want. And he has been true to his word. It's a no-brainer that the two go hand in hand, and I think the Army are definitely building on a recruitment plan to say, okay, well actually, how do we promote ourselves more widely to the athlete community at a younger age, 16 to 18 years, you know, that ideal catchment area age, to then get them in to ensure that, you know, we already have a pathway where they can play sport at a very high level across the Army, and also get a full-time career that also allows them to be active and have that test of resilience and mental toughness. And yeah.
I'm worried that we're always in danger of being accused of being a voice piece for the military. It's not like that at all, and it's not for everybody. Being in the military and marrying a sporting career doesn't necessarily always work. But I must say the Royal Artillery are really successful. There's you, Cara Sartingstall's just won a medal, and of course Heather Stanning as well. What is it about the Gunners that make them so special on the sporting spectrum?
Beth Dainton is also in the Gunners.
She is.
You can't forget my Welsh teammate.
Sorry, Beth Ann.
So I think it's the job role in itself is definitely a lot more active and physically demanding, especially kind of working on a gun line. There's a lot of kind of mental resilience and mental aptitude that goes into the calculations for a lot of things. I think it's probably the type of female that wants to be in that role, that physically active role, physically demanding, is also the kind of female that then would be successful on a sports field. Not only that, the artillery are very good at promoting sport across the Royal Regiment, because they realise how good it is at developing the skills you then need. I mean, you know, you can reel off respect, you can reel off the entire British Army standards, the loyalty, selfless commitment, integrity, discipline, respect for others. You need all of that to be a good athlete. So if you're going to develop that in an athlete setting, you're also then going to become a better soldier or officer. And I think the artillery see the benefit in that, and therefore promote sport very widely across all units.
And as we sort of wind down, can you kind of give us an indication as to, I know you haven't talked about retirement and it's not in your plans at the moment, but obviously everyone's career, playing career comes to an end. In terms of time with the army and possibly time in rugby, what are you thinking? Do you have any? You sound like someone who, you know, you do courses because you want to educate yourself, you want to better yourself. So you must have thought beyond rugby, beyond the army, what you might do with your life.
Yeah, so I've done a little bit of everything. So I've done my level 2 coaching, I've done my referees qualification, and I've also done a master's in strength and conditioning. That's where my main passion is the athletic development side of things. So I recently read a book called Invisible Women, which is about the data biases in scientific research, and essentially the fact that it's all based on men. And we know that only 10% of all sports science research is conducted using a female cohort. The rest is basically done on men. There's someone I follow on Instagram too, actually. So Dr. Stacey Sims is one, and then the Well HQ is the other account. And it's essentially females that are kind of promoting those data gaps. And one of these sayings is that women are not small men, because essentially what we do is we take the scientific research that we have for male cohorts, and then we just scale it down and go, okay, that can apply to women now. Well, actually, physiologically, biomechanically, chemically, we're built completely differently. So
I've been saying that for years.
Honestly, I read this book and honestly thought, how have women survived this long? It's very worrying that a lot of like the health and safety medication is not designed for women. So it makes you question then everything else that we put in place. So for me, from a sports scientist point of view, I'm following a training plan that's basically designed on research that's worked for men. That doesn't mean it's going to work for women. So I have an aspiration to do a PhD. The Army actually have a team at Santos that are looking at biomechanics, the physiology of females, and how they can kind of reduce the risk of musculoskeletal injuries, which is incredible that the Army are realising that. I think off the back of, you know, the hip injuries that happened a few years ago that we heard about in the news, you know, they're realising that we should do more for our females. So I've got a real passion for helping female athletes actually reach their potential, so understanding how that looks from a scientific point of view, and then, you know, working with female teams. My aspiration, I would love to be at a World Cup, a Rugby World Cup, working as an S&C for an international team. That would be amazing. To say that I've been there as a player and then I'm there with a team. It'd be incredible if it was Wales, but you know, I'm open to New Zealand, Australia, Canada, any other teams.
Yeah, somebody's emigrated.
Yeah, let's hope they're watching the geography.
Were those tests done on men because the scientists conducting the tests were men and they didn't feel comfortable prodding and probing women? Why has it just been done on guys?
So one of the biggest reasons that's given is the menstrual cycle. Right. So for a female cohort, you cannot get a large female cohort who are all at the same stage of their menstrual cycle at exactly the same time. And we know that the menstrual cycle affects your ability to train and your responses to training. So it's essentially, they've said, well, that's a variable that we can't control, and therefore it's too hard to do a controlled study, and therefore we're just not going to use women and we'll use men.
Doesn't seem a good enough excuse to me.
It's a bit of a get out, and then then you go, okay, well then we're still on the back foot, because actually then we're still not even understanding how our menstrual cycle affects our training. We do know that at certain times we're more susceptible to injury, at other times we have less energy, therefore we should do less weights and more kind of low, slow cardio. But that's kind of that's all we do know, and that's why. So Dr. Stacey Sims does a lot on menopause. You know, it's something that's not spoken about. And the Well HQ look at kind of every other aspect of training, the female triad. So we know that women, I've gone off on a tangent, but you've set me off now, guys. We know that females are more susceptible to low energy availability when training. So women stereotypically undereat, and then that affects their menstrual cycle. Then there's the risk of osteoporosis and stuff like that. They also, as a really interesting fact that the Well HQ brought up, that if your sports bra is badly fitted, so if you had two females running a marathon with a badly fitted sports bra, the one that had a well-fitted sports bra would finish the marathon, I think it was like 10 minutes ahead of the one that had a badly fitted sports bra, which you wouldn't even think about.
It's because when you have a badly fitted sports bra, and I know about those, it plays in your mind. You're like, well, that hurts, you know, and that could be the 10 minutes. That's
if it's
incredible.
playing on your mind, it really is ill-fitting.
Yeah, but it's something that you never, you never talk about, you never speak about, you never think about. So the more now we can bring up these statistics, become more aware of them, you know, in a sport setting, actually we're just allowing our female athletes more ability to reach their potential, and that's what I'm really passionate about. So I think, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I think to become an elite S&C would be my dream goal after retiring.
Well, look, that's your future aspiration. This is the bit where you can be really self-indulgent. Of all the things that you've accomplished, including your recent certificate for mental health first aiding, what's the one thing that brings you the most joy? Was it graduating from Sandhurst? Was it getting your first cap for Wales, being part of the Welsh setup that beat England? Was it Commonwealth Games? Was it World Cup? Which is the bit? He's not
putting words in your mouth. You know, you can pick whatever you want.
Honestly, I was like, that is such a hard question. Because
is there, or are you able to divorce the two? Are you able to have a personal achievement and a sporting achievement? What's the thing that?
So I think as an experience, the Commonwealth Games 2018 was absolutely incredible, because the Australian support for female sport is, I think, probably the best in the world, or the best I've ever experienced. We know that obviously France, they sell out a stadium as well when the French women play at home, but the stadium that we played in was sold out. Our opening game was against Australia, Friday Night Lights, and the stadium was just electric, and they love an underdog. The Aussies will just support anyone as well, so they were cheering for us even once we were playing against Australia, and I just remember that feeling. It's something that I'd never been able to experience before, and I don't think it's one I'll ever forget. And I was just so grateful to be able to have experienced what the men must feel when they play at the Principality, or England play at Twickenham, with that full crowd and that full electric energy. So that's certainly something I would, as a memory, I will cherish. I think commissioning from Sandhurst is probably my dream, that is my highlight of life.
I'm surprised you didn't have us
talking to you. I think because everything that's happened since then, that basically was a springboard then. I think what Sandhurst equipped me with, that feeling of commissioning, with knowing what you'd achieved throughout the year or what you'd been able to get through, and I will never forget again that commissioning parade, the fireworks display they put on, that night where you get to celebrate with your platoon, but then also your family and friends get to experience a little bit of that joy with you. I don't think I would have been as equipped to achieve everything I have achieved in my life if I hadn't have been through Sandhurst, because that year gave me the resilience, the mental toughness, the physical robustness, and the belief and confidence that I could achieve anything as long as I put my mind to it. And I think that then opened every single door for what I've now achieved since then.
Well, putting the gem into Gemma, thank you so much for talking to us and taking a little bit of your time just to talk through so much that you've accomplished and hoping to in the future as well. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much.